I woke with a groan, my head throbbing and my blanket tangled around me like some kind of sleep-fueled mummy experiment. The sunlight streaming through the blinds should have been soothing, but it wasn't. Something soft, warm, and impossibly insistent pressed against me, and before I could even open my eyes fully, a low, teasing trill vibrated in my ear. My brain finally caught up to my body, and I froze. Straddling me, grinning like a creature who had just discovered the most delightful human weakness, was my alien servant. Not politely hovering over the edge of the bed, not offering me a cup of interstellar coffee, but straddling me. Her hands, well, more like tentacle finger hybrids, were spread across my chest, her eyes glowing faintly with amusement. I blinked, certain I had either died or slipped into some fever dream that involved far too much alcohol and far too little sense. "Good morning, master," she chirped in that sing-song voice that was somehow both innocent and wildly inappropriate. "I've completed my first task of the day." I swallowed hard, trying to comprehend what task meant in her alien dictionary. Did it involve gravity-defying back scratches? Interdimensional laundry folding? Or, heaven forbid, some kind of very personal hygiene demonstration that humans definitely weren't supposed to experience before caffeine? Her grin widened as if she could read my panic like a children's picture book. "I noticed your body temperature was slightly below optimal efficiency. Immediate warming protocol initiated." She shifted slightly, which meant she was now closer. Too close. I coughed nervously, trying to articulate something vaguely human-like. "Personal space." But my words tripped over each other. You maybe not." She tilted her head, eyes glowing mischievously. "Not what, master? Not efficient? Not comfortable? Or not thrilled?" Her hands, tentacle fingers really, fluttered over my chest with exaggerated delicacy, and I realized that my protests were entirely useless. In her mind, every squirm, every flinch, was a sign of approval, not resistance. The first sign that this morning was going to be a disaster came when she reached over to what I assumed was her service kit. She produced a tiny device that hummed and whirred, tossing it in the air before it expanded into some kind of bizarre coffee contraption. Alien spices floated around it, glowing softly like bioluminescent fireflies. "Breakfast, master! Nutrient infusion with subtle aphrodisiac properties. Enjoy!" Before I could object, she tilted the cup, pouring the steaming, glowing liquid directly onto the bedspread and slightly onto my chest. I yelped. She giggled. The sound made my ears burn and my heartbeat stutter. Apparently, she considered this a successful delivery. Then she leaned in closer, brushing her face against mine, not aggressively, but with that same mischievous energy that said clearly, "I know exactly what I'm doing, and you're going to like it whether you admit it or not." My mind, simultaneously scandalized and slightly fascinated, tried to calculate escape options, but her long, dexterous limbs had already blocked every conceivable route. The cat, wide-eyed and judging from the floor, seemed to side with her. Her next move was entirely predictable in retrospect. She reached toward my nightstand and flicked a small object into orbit, giggling at the miniature arc it traced above my head. "Laundry, master! It's more aerodynamic this way." She gave a triumphant little trill, clearly proud of her handiwork. I groaned, imagining how I would explain this to the neighbors if, by some cosmic miracle, they noticed the floating socks or the glowing alien coffee on my chest. She paused, noting my expression, tilting her head again. "Master, you look tense. That is inefficient for optimal human functioning. Shall I administer a tension reduction protocol?" Before I could answer, her knees nudged me, her chest pressed again, and she grinned like a cat who had cornered the canary. I could only gape as she began to straddle me with increasingly inventive positions, all while managing to somehow balance her coffee contraption and a floating plate of what looked like alien pancakes. They smelled strange, like cinnamon mixed with ozone, and I suspected some of the aphrodisiac properties had already seeped into the air. I tried to talk, to reason, but every attempt was met with a soft trill and a playful shift of her weight. "Master, this is your morning protocol. Resistance is inadvisable." Highly inadvisable. Highly inadvisable, indeed. I had never been trapped like this in my life, and yet, the combination of panic, absurdity, and undeniably alluring alien mischief made me question my previous assumptions about personal safety. And somewhere between the floating pancakes and the giggling, mischievous gaze, a tiny, stupid part of my brain whispered, maybe this is fun. Maybe this is exactly the kind of chaos my life needed. By the time the first human words of protest died in my throat, she had moved again, laughing softly as she inadvertently sent a sock spinning past my face and my glowing alien coffee teetering toward the floor. I gave up. Fully. Resigned myself to whatever strange, flirtatious, chaotic morning she had in mind, and accepted that my life, sleep, privacy, and dignity was officially hers to toy with. And she grinned, very pleased with herself. Breakfast should have been a calm affair. It was not. Not in the slightest. I barely had the strength to sit up when she materialized in front of the kitchen counter, floating slightly, of course, because gravity apparently meant nothing to her species. The glowing coffee device hovered beside her, emitting a soft hum, and a plate of what looked like neon pancakes twirled lazily in midair. She glanced at me with a mischievous grin and, without warning, hopped onto the counter and straddled it, which naturally meant she was now straddling me by proximity as well. "Master," she purred, leaning toward me so that her glowing eyes practically pierced my skull. "Your morning efficiency levels are suboptimal. I've decided that close proximity assistance will accelerate your nutrient absorption." I groaned, attempting a dignified human protest that ended somewhere between a cough and a squeak. My arms flailed helplessly, knocking the hovering plate just slightly off balance, which made the neon pancakes wobble ominously. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with delight, clearly interpreting my panic as appreciation. Then, with a flourish of her hands, she added a dash of alien spice to my coffee. A literal dash, enough to make the liquid shimmer and steam in rainbow colors. "Accidentally," she said, with the faintest trill of laughter. The kind of laugh that makes you simultaneously want to scold someone and fall over laughing at how ridiculous they are. I wasn't sure if I wanted to drink the coffee, but the smell was intoxicating, in a vaguely dangerous sort of way. She leaned closer again, tentacle-like fingers brushing against my shoulders, and suddenly it felt like the room had shrunk. I tried to move, but she shifted with me, staying just slightly ahead of every flinch, every step. My hand shot out to steady the counter, but in doing so, I accidentally triggered her next prank. A sock, one of the very socks she had flung into orbit yesterday, whirled down from some invisible tether, smacking me squarely in the chest. She giggled, a musical trill that bounced off the walls. "Ah, my floating laundry! It's perfect for morning cardio," she said, straddling the counter with all the elegance of someone who had absolutely no sense of balance, but insisted it looked natural. By now, the cat, or whatever alien equivalent she had borrowed from some distant orbiting pet facility, was glaring at me from the floor, clearly judging my incompetence. The alien servant noticed this and winked at the pet before bouncing slightly, sending a tiny spice shaker spinning across the room in slow motion. I reached for it, but she caught it midair with one of her tentacle fingers and leaned toward me again, whispering, "Multitasking improves efficiency, master." I gave up on efficiency. I gave up on dignity. I gave up on coffee. I tried to protest again, this time using actual words, but she interpreted my stuttering as encouragement, pressing her weight closer, her knee nudging my thigh in a way that was not socially normal on any planet I had ever visited. "Yes," she said, glancing at me with mock seriousness. "You're doing very well, master. Your blush levels are optimal." The pancakes, now completely untethered, floated lazily toward the ceiling, bouncing gently as if gravity itself had decided to take a vacation. She leaned down and flicked them toward me with a flick of her wrist, laughing as one landed perfectly on my shoulder. The coffee, meanwhile, tilted and sprayed rainbow liquid across the counter. I swatted at it instinctively, which caused her to squeal delightfully and tumble backward just enough that her hands landed on my chest. Again. At some point, she decided that the only way to improve my morning efficiency was to nap on my lap. I tried to protest, but she had already curled up like some interstellar cat, humming softly, apparently oblivious to the fact that she was crushing me into the counter with a combination of gravity defiance and sheer mischievous intent. A particularly ambitious attempt to free myself ended with my arm accidentally slapping the floating spice shaker, sending a glittering cloud into my face. She laughed so hard I thought she might levitate entirely, tentacles flailing in all directions, narrowly missing the floating pancakes again. "Oh, master, you are positively adorable when flustered," she trilled, leaning down to brush an invisible crumb off my forehead. My dignity, if it had ever existed, had officially left the building. My neighbors were probably filing noise complaints by now. The thumps, squeaks, and musical laughter resonating through the walls had to sound like some kind of extraterrestrial jazz concert gone horribly wrong. Meanwhile, she shifted her weight, now straddling my torso from a slightly different angle, eyes sparkling with the thrill of the chaos she had created. By the time I realized that the rainbow coffee had pulled near my lap, I surrendered entirely. Whatever morning protocol she had envisioned was happening, and I was helpless, flustered, and absurdly aroused. Somewhere between the floating pancakes, rainbow coffee, airborne socks, and the constant weight of her playful straddling, a part of me thought, maybe this is exactly the kind of chaos I needed. Maybe, somehow, it was fun. She leaned back, humming contentedly, clearly proud of herself, and whispered, "Breakfast efficiency, complete. Now for the next protocol, master." And I groaned, fully aware that next protocol could involve literally anything, but also weirdly looking forward to it. By the time lunch rolled around, I had long since stopped trying to predict her next move. My kitchen, if it could still be called that, looked like a fusion of interstellar bazaar and a slapstick disaster zone. Floating utensils hovered lazily in midair, some smeared with glowing alien condiments, while my cat, or whatever alien version of one she had borrowed, sat on the floor, glaring at me with unamused intensity. She appeared in the center of the chaos like a tiny, glowing hurricane, bouncing slightly as if the laws of physics were her personal playground. "Lunch, master!" she announced, flipping her wrists and sending a plate of luminous pasta spinning across the room. The noodles wove through the air like some abstract alien art installation before landing, somehow perfectly balanced, on the edge of the counter. I tried to move forward to steady them, but she jumped again, tentacles brushing against my shoulders, and somehow ended up perched across my lap as if I were a chair specially designed for her species. "Efficiency," she whispered, brushing a finger across my arm, "requires close supervision." Close supervision. Translation: she was straddling me again, wobbling slightly in a display of interstellar grace that somehow emphasized both her alien physique and the utter absurdity of the situation. I flinched, she laughed, and my lunch teetered dangerously on the edge of the counter, yet another visual hazard in this comedy of errors. I attempted diplomacy. "Maybe you—" I started, but she cut me off with a trill that vibrated through the floor, hands resting lightly, yet insistently, on my chest. "No, master. You need guidance. You require supervision. You will benefit from maximum proximity." She leaned in, eyes gleaming, as if challenging me to resist, and I realized there was no negotiating with someone who considered straddling a perfectly normal form of culinary oversight. Her next prank was audacious, even by her standards. With a flick of her wrist, a small levitating plate sent my neatly folded laundry into the air. Socks spun in slow arcs, underwear performed daring flips, and a shirt floated past my face like some kind of interstellar flag. I swatted at them reflexively, only to find that she had already adjusted her position, pressing against me with an almost smug satisfaction. "Ah," she said, tilting her head. "Laundry aerodynamics practice is essential. You'll thank me later." I couldn't argue. The chaos was absolute, my dignity gone, and somehow, I was laughing despite myself. Every attempt to escape her playful assaults resulted in a new disaster. A floating fork smacked my shoulder, noodles slid down my chest, and her tentacle-like hair brushed across my face with irritating, teasing precision. Each time, she cooed softly, as if encouraging me to endure it for my own good. "Master," she murmured suddenly, leaning closer so her glowing eyes were mere inches from my own. "You are responding well to my guidance. Emotional engagement is increasing." She giggled softly, brushing her lips past my ear in a motion so innocent yet infuriatingly intimate that I shivered despite my best efforts to remain composed. I had no doubt she intended it that way. Her species, it seemed, had zero concept of boundaries, and every action was a careful combination of flirtation and chaos. Lunch became an obstacle course. The glowing pasta spiraled in the air, my rainbow coffee threatened to spill again, and she managed to balance both precariously while adjusting my posture to ensure optimal absorption. I attempted a protest, raising a hand, but she caught it with a gentle, teasing squeeze and whispered, "Resistance is inefficient, master." She leaned further, brushing against me in ways that were meant to distract and delight simultaneously. Her mischief extended beyond me. She plucked a floating napkin and sent it twirling toward the ceiling, then aimed a tiny levitating spice shaker at the cat, who responded with a hiss that only made her laugh harder. Objects hovered, collided softly, and spun in graceful arcs, turning my kitchen into something resembling a choreographed interstellar ballet, if the ballet were chaotic, brightly glowing, and sexually charged. Between bursts of laughter and awkward dodges, I found myself noticing her little gestures, the way she paused just long enough to watch my reactions, the careful precision of her touch when she adjusted my hair or nudged my shoulders, the soft trill of satisfaction when one of her pranks succeeded. Somewhere beneath all the chaos, there was affection, strange as it was, and I realized that part of me didn't want her to stop. By the end of lunch, I was a tangled mess of spilled coffee, glowing noodles, floating socks, and laughter, with her perched triumphantly across my lap, hair draped over my shoulders like some exotic, mischievous crown. She leaned back, arms crossed, still giggling, and whispered, "Master, your tolerance is improving. Efficiency ratings, maximum." I groaned, imagining the neighbors' complaints about the strange noises, and felt a bizarre mix of exasperation and amusement. She had officially turned my life into an interstellar circus, but a small, stubborn part of me was starting to look forward to the next round. Whatever her protocols entailed, I was trapped, flustered, and ridiculously entertained. She tilted her head, eyes glimmering with playful challenge, and said, "Shall we continue, master? There is much more to your training, and I intend to see it completed, thoroughly." And I realized, with equal parts horror and reluctant excitement, that I was entirely at her mercy, and I might secretly enjoy every chaotic second of it. By the time evening rolled in, I had stopped trying to resist. The apartment looked like a battlefield, or maybe an alien art installation gone spectacularly wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Floating pancakes still hovered lazily near the ceiling, a faint rainbow shimmer lingered where the coffee had spilled, and the cat, or whatever alien pet was now squatting in the corner, glared at us like we had ruined its entire existence. She, on the other hand, was radiant in her chaos, perched across my lap like it was her rightful throne, grinning with that same mischievous spark that had destroyed my morning, lunch, and general sense of control. "Master," she said softly, leaning closer, "your efficiency has reached peak potential. But there is one final protocol: acceptance of alien guidance." Her glowing eyes flickered, half teasing, half serious, and I realized she wasn't asking. She was declaring. I groaned, but it was different this time. Not panic or resistance, but a reluctant, amused surrender. "Fine," I muttered. "I accept. Happy now?" Her grin widened, and she trilled softly, the sound vibrating through the apartment. Tentacle-like fingers brushed lightly across my shoulders, down my arms, and back up again in a gesture that was playful, intimate, and slightly infuriating. She leaned in closer, hovering just above me, and whispered, "Good, master. Now we can focus on personal engagement." I didn't know whether to laugh or hide under the nearest blanket, but she interpreted my stunned silence as enthusiasm. She shifted, straddling me in a way that left me immobilized but oddly content. Her tiny, mischievous grin never wavered as she adjusted a floating utensil here, nudged a pancake there, and whispered, "You're doing very well. Emotional responsiveness, excellent." Somewhere in the middle of her antics, I realized I was laughing genuinely, not out of fear or panic but because her presence, chaotic, flirtatious, and utterly unpredictable, was infectious. She leaned closer, brushing her hair across my cheek, and I caught the faint scent of something sweet and alien. It was intoxicating. "You know," I muttered, half to myself. "You're ridiculous." She tilted her head, considering this, and then trilled in amusement. "Ridiculous is my specialty, master. And clearly you enjoy it." She hopped lightly, adjusting her position so that she was now lightly resting on my lap while floating slightly, a defiance of gravity that somehow made her seem even more in charge. Floating laundry drifted past us lazily, a sock spun into orbit, and the glowing coffee had somehow managed to form a rainbow pool near the counter. Yet none of it mattered anymore. I was entirely wrapped up in her energy, in the ridiculous intimacy of being trapped by someone so mischievous, flirty, and insistent. She leaned back, stretching out like she owned the entire space, eyes gleaming with a satisfied glimmer. "Master," she whispered, "you are amusing. Delightful, even. My duties are most enjoyable." Her voice dropped slightly, playful yet suggestive, and I realized the subtle romance behind all the chaos. Despite the absurdity, despite the constant pranks, there was a sincerity in her tone that made me pause. I exhaled, letting the tension melt from my shoulders. I kind of like this," I admitted softly. She trilled in approval, as if my words were the highest compliment she could receive. Her hands, tentacle fingers really, danced lightly across my arms, brushing against me in small, teasing motions that left me flushed and entirely helpless. Then, with a sudden, gleeful burst, she nudged a floating pancake toward me, flung a sock spinning across the room, and landed lightly in a new position across my lap, whispering, "Next protocol, maximum engagement." I groaned again, but the groan was mixed with laughter, a strange mixture of exasperation and delight. I couldn't stop smiling. Somehow, amidst the chaos, the floating pancakes, and the rainbow coffee, I had accepted her completely. I had surrendered to the absurdity, the mischief, and the playful, intimate charm of my alien servant. Her antics were relentless, her flirtation constant, but beneath it all, I sensed a bizarre, wonderful connection. She wasn't just pranking me for fun, there was affection in every teasing glance, every playful nudge, every mischievous straddle. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the apartment, and she leaned in, hovering lightly, whispering softly, "I will always serve you this way, master, thoroughly, mischievously, and affectionately." I laughed, shaking my head, feeling the ridiculousness of it all, but somehow grateful for every chaotic, intimate moment. And in that moment I realized that life with her would never be predictable. Every day would be a new disaster, a new prank, a new flirtatious ambush. But strangely, it sounded perfect. Perfectly chaotic, perfectly mischievous, perfectly hers. As she curled slightly against me, glowing softly, hovering with that impossible grace, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to relax. The apartment was a mess, the neighbors probably thought I was insane, and my dignity was officially gone, but for the first time that day, I didn't care. I had surrendered to the alien chaos, the intimate mischief, and the strange, ridiculous romance that had invaded my life. And I couldn't wait to see what protocol she would invent next.